Welcome to the latest webinar in the Development and Support series delivered by NIHR Academy. This webinar, Compassionate and Inclusive Leadership, is delivered in collaboration between the NIHR and Oakridge, one of our leadership development program partners. This webinar will be facilitated by Mark Blanchard and Clare, who are senior consultants to Oakridge. They also have extensive experience in behavioural and cultural change and are passionate about helping people and teams to achieve their full potential. And with that in mind, I'll pass over to you now, Mark.
So what are we going to cover today? We're going to explore the principles that underpin compassionate and inclusive leadership. We're going to talk about some myths and dispel some myths, describe the benefits of leading with inclusivity and compassion, and give you some tips and ideas of how you can further develop your leadership style in this particular area. So as a reminder to everybody, the NHS People Plan sets out what NHS people can expect from each other and their leaders. And it builds upon all the creativity and drive shown by everybody in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan focuses on how everyone must continue to look after each other and foster a culture of inclusion and belonging, as well as take action to grow the workforce, train people and work together differently to deliver the best patient outcomes. So you might have seen this nice rainbow, the NHS People Promise. So the plan really sets out practical actions for employers. Specific areas that are covered by this are looking after our people. So providing high quality health and well-being support for everybody. Ensuring everyone feels that they belong in the NHS with a particular focus on tackling any forms of discrimination. Looking at new ways of working and delivering care through making effective use of a full range of people's skills and experience. And growing for the future, so a focus on how people are recruited and retained, and welcoming back colleagues who want to return to the workplace. And as you can see from this slide, we can see compassionate and inclusive leadership is at the top of the rainbow in that red bar. And they're the foundational elements of the People Promise. However, I'm sure everyone's come across when everyone says be more compassionate quite often as a rolling of eyes, and it's not unusual for compassion to be viewed negatively. You know, something that maybe gets in the way of making progress or making tough decisions, and we can really see this being amplified through times of huge challenge we've seen over the past 12, almost 12 months we are of the pandemic. And this kind of perception is really amplified in challenging times. Budgets are challenged, time challenges. Everyone's working under extreme pressure in very challenging situations. So some of the myths that that can lead to are, being compassionate will lead to a loss of commitment to purpose and high quality performance. We won't be able to have those really tough performance conversations. And if we do, could they be labeled as bullying? If we apply compassionate approaches, and if we're too compassionate, it might lead to an easy way out, and fully consensus going forwards, not making the tough decisions, not really putting patients and communities first in our decision making. We won't be able to challenge the status quo. So similar to be seen as bullying and overbearing is that to be compassionate, we won't be able to challenge that status quo and make really radical changes. And ultimately, we all know it's the people with the most power and those who are most ruthless who will control the system. Therefore, if you're going to be compassionate, you're never going to be able to push things through or drive things. It's always the ones with power to do that. So interested to hear from everybody on the call today. Joe, could you open the first poll? So from those statements, which of those resonate with you? So you can tick all that apply.
I've opened the poll now. You should be able to see that on your screen. And we can start in to see the votes coming in now. So we'll give it another minute. So we're almost at 75%. So let's have those last few votes coming in for our last few seconds. Okay, so I'll end the poll now and we can now share the results.
So what do you see there, Joe?
So we can see that teamwork and system working will be controlled by whoever has the most power and is the most ruthless. That's certainly been the most popular myth, shall we say, at 53%, closely followed by not being able to challenge the status quo, always taking the easy or consensus way forward. Will be labelled as bullying, about 18% there, and leading to that loss of commitment at 14%.
Really interesting for me, that is that compassion can quite often be seen as being a weakness, whereas actually it should be a huge strength for leaders. So yeah, it's interesting to see those poll results. Which ones of those resonate with you, Joe?
I think for me, it's that piece around power and you know, the fact that compassion can be seen as a lack of strength and a lack of drive, and perhaps that lack of drive and power to make change and have change happen.
That's great.
Okay, I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you very much. So what we should see is that compassion, or a compassionate approach to leadership, should motivate and drive creativity. And that's through demonstrating that care and encouraging involvement from all others around, so working and including colleagues. That really helps build that commitment to the cause, the overall cause, and great performance. Being compassionate through listening, understanding, empathizing, and helping makes it possible to have those difficult conversations, because you build strong foundations of trust. So actually, compassionate leadership helps have those difficult conversations. Creating a psychological safety in terms of in teams helps colleagues to be open about admitting their mistakes, sharing their concerns. This can be really uncomfortable at times, of actually sharing your worries, concerns, to call out bullying, harassment, and discrimination. And a compassionate approach to leadership results in increased motivation, creativity, and team effectiveness. And finally, creating the conditions where everyone's looking at the collective good and the common goal. So the needs of the public, the patients, staff, colleagues. The needs of the common goal is prioritized over the individual agendas. So dissipating that power or status or the ego. So this is how compassion should be perceived. It should be valued as hugely value adding. Now, Professor Michael West, who's a senior fellow at the King's Fund, has been studying compassionate leadership, and he's been involved in the development of the National Improvement and Leadership Development Framework, which is an evidence-based national framework that's been used to guide actions on improvement, skill building, leadership development, talent management for staff in the NHS. Now, compassion for Professor West could be that care assistant who stayed for an hour after their shift ended, holding the hand of an elderly lady who's in distress and talking to her caringly until she was calm. Compassion could be the doctor who's dancing with an elderly, lonely man when they discovered they have a shared interest in dancing. Compassion could be the researcher who clears a space in their really, really crammed diary schedule to take time out to have a coffee with a colleague who's really struggling. So compassion is a core value of the NHS, and Professor West describes how compassionate leadership drives innovation through creating a compelling vision and strategy, enthusiastically working across organizational boundaries, positively including people and participating, and proactively supporting others and encouraging autonomy. So let's have a look at the foundations of authentic leadership. So if we're compassionate, we include everybody, we seek to involve everybody, we listen to everybody, we empathize with everybody, we help everybody. If we act with compassion, we're already acting from a place of inclusivity. And Joe will explore that further in a few minutes. And he also identified that being able to lead with compassionate inclusivity, you need to be an authentic leader. And that is, you need to be deeply self-aware, genuine, transparent, and it's a strong foundation to enable us to connect with others. We're going to be exploring authentic leadership in a webinar coming up in March. So if you signed up to that, we'll explore it further there. We're due to launch an online module as well on that topic as well. But we're going to just focus on compassionate and inclusive leadership today. So before we look at the key principles of compassionate and inclusive leadership, just taking a look at other work done by Professor West on the 3 core human needs at work. So being a compassionate inclusive leader means that you're addressing the core human needs, and that's your own, but also those of your people. It's effectively the ABCs of self or intrinsic motivation. So A for autonomy. So this means we have control over what we've been tasked to do and not feel directed. We want to have a voice and an influence over decisions and feel that we're trusted to get on and deliver what's expected of us. Autonomy means that you do something because you want to, not because you have to. I mean, imagine situations, I've been in situations when I've been given a task, but I don't feel it's actually within my control to do that because I can't make a decision, or I have to defer to somebody else, or I'm not given all the resources required to do it. That can be really demotivating, those situations. It's not meeting a core human need. Imagine a situation you may be where you feel like you're being micromanaged by somebody. That's really demotivating because it impacts on that need for autonomy. B's for belonging. So belonging, a fundamental element in motivation. So those emotional and personal bonds that we build with others is critical to human well-being because we're social animals at the end of the day. We need to feel cared for, respected, connected to others, part of something bigger. For those of you familiar with Maslow, then Maslow's hierarchy of needs identifies belonging as a psychological need within the hierarchy. This can be really, really challenging if we're all working remotely. So, over the past year, a feeling of becoming disconnected from teams and disconnected from organization can really impact the belonging need, and that impacts motivation. And lastly, competence. We want to feel we have the skills to be able to actually carry out the tasks expected of us. The feeling that we can do the best job that we can. We're not impacted by not having the skills. Think back to a time when you've been given a task and you think you've been set up for failure because you've been given a really difficult, challenging thing to do, and you're thinking, I'm not equipped with the skills to be able to do this. That could be really, really demotivating. So these fundamental needs form a basis of a compassionate leadership model. And a compassionate leader takes these into account. They're self-aware of how they are motivated, but also that they're curious about their people as well and understanding what their needs are. So Joe, could we have a poll 2? A quick question asking you, how do you feel the ABCs, how are these needs, how do you feel your needs are being met at work? So the poll is a little, some, or a lot.
I've just launched the poll now, so you should be seeing that on your screen. And the votes are coming in. So just a few more seconds, get those last few votes in. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. And the results I will share on screen. So we've got 51% having some of those needs met, 39% a lot, and 10% just a little.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so it's good to see 39% think across the ABC feel your needs are being met, but bigger proportion, 51% some. So it's important to understand which of those needs are not being met and then identifying ways of actually achieving that. Okay. So the 4 principles of compassionate leadership are attending. So I pay attention to you. I listen with fascination. Just reflect on how you ensure you're paying attention to others. How actively do you listen? Some people are familiar with different models around active listening. How actively do you listen with people? Understanding, because I'm paying attention, it means I understand why you are feeling distressed, understand why you're feeling how you're feeling. How often are you just listening and not really inquiring as to why the other person's feeling like they do? How often are you just taking it in but not actually giving anything back, which is a key part of active listening, to reflect back. A third principle is about empathizing. It's where you feel at some level that you're feeling the same as the other person, and that motivates me to do something to help you. If you're empathetic, then you want to do something to help the other person. Yet leaders are typically in a very similar situation, a similar environment to colleagues that they manage, and as such, they may be feeling similar kind of emotions or have felt the same emotions. This really helps them empathize and engage in that effective discussion about the issues. And this can be really helpful. As an individual, feeling understood and valued by somebody else increases that trust, that loyalty, and that engagement ultimately, and helps drive motivation. Teresa Wiseman, who's the Professor of Applied Health Research in the Cancer Care Unit at the Royal Marsden, and also an NIHR academic training advocate, studied empathy in healthcare and identified 4 attributes of empathy. So one is to be able to see the world as others see it. So putting aside your own stuff and see the situation from the other person's point of view. To be non-judgmental, to understand another person's feelings, and to communicate our understanding of the other person's feelings. So rather than typically of, well, at least it's not as bad as such and such, or, oh, well, it could be worse. Instead, it's empathizing that it sounds like you're in a really hard place, but tell me more about it. So there are ways of communicating in a way which exudes empathy. And the last one about helping. So from all the other 3 key principles is if you understand the other person's point of view and where they are and you're empathizing with them, then it's to take that thoughtful, intelligent, appropriate action to help relieve an individual's suffering. So compassionate leaders are willing to offer help to their colleagues and are driven to take thoughtful and caring action to benefit them. It's not necessarily about fixing the problem, but helping them find an appropriate solution for themselves. So the next poll. So based on what you've heard so far from the 4 key principles of compassionate leadership, which areas might you need to pay more attention to? So Jo, could you open the next poll, please?
Yeah, I've just launched it, so it should be showing on your screen now. I'm starting to see those votes come in. So we'll just leave it open a couple more seconds while we get the majority of people voting. And I will end it now. Okay, so sharing results on the screen. So we've got attending as the top area for more attention, 42%, understanding at 25%, empathizing at 16%, and helping at 37%. And I'm wondering if those results reflect the situation we're in now, where we're very, very busy and focused on delivering for patients, maybe more so than our research, and that's having an impact on those results potentially. Definitely. I'll stop sharing that.
Thank you very much, Jo. Yeah, so things to consider in there in terms of the attending, how actively we listen, how are we giving the time to the other person, rather than just fitting something in a very busy schedule, actually taking time out, asking those questions, asking the questions to gain understanding, really empathizing with the other person. And I know it can be quite difficult of the empathizing, and you've done everything else, but then you don't know how to help the other person. And actually helping might just being there for them, and having a coffee and dropping everything for 5 minutes. Okay. So just closing the first section before I hand over to Joe. So the NIHR is really committed to actively and openly supporting and promoting equality, diversity and inclusion. And it's really about understanding the causes of inequities and barriers to diversity as we look at training, in research and delivery, and understanding the interventions that will work in those. Reaching other communities, so that collaborating with other communities where the research will make the biggest difference. And embedding equality, diversity and inclusion in our culture. So the NIHR is committed to this. So what I'm going to do now is to hand over to Joe, who's going to explore inclusivity a bit more and how you can become a more inclusive leader.
Thanks, Mark. So as we've already identified, the action of being a compassionate leader would automatically subsume the impression of inclusion, because by automatically being compassionate, we're automatically going to include everybody. And it's important to think about that value of inclusivity and why NIHR are placing so much attention to the EDI agenda. Not only is it the right thing to do in terms of organisation, research, society in general, helping everybody to feel good about their work, personally valued for their contribution. Inclusive leadership also provides some specific organisational benefits, and these were identified by Harvard Business Review back in 2016. So as we can see on the screen here, we've got 29% more likely to behave collaboratively if inclusivity is practiced as a cultural shift. People are more willing to be able to collaborate and want to collaborate. They feel safe to. 20% are more likely to say they make high quality decisions as a result. 17% of organisations are more likely to report that they're high performing. And a 10% improvement in perception of inclusion increases work attendance by almost 1 day a year per employee, which of course reduces cost of absenteeism. So those organisational benefits are really out as well, supporting the fact it's the right thing to do from a societal perspective as well. And of course, gathering together a mix of people doesn't guarantee inclusivity. We do require specific action and behaviour behind that. And that's underpinned by inclusive leadership. So the style of leadership that assures that all of the team members are treated respectfully, fairly valued, and have that sense of belonging, that human need being met, and are confident as a result and inspired to act. So in 2016, Deloitte developed a model for inclusive leadership behaviours and talked about 6 traits of inclusive leaders. And these were developed as a result of their research. And if we look at the model here, we can briefly run around it. First of all, curiosity. Highly inclusive leaders have an open mindset, a desire to understand how others view and experience the world, and have a tolerance for ambiguity. Secondly, we've got cultural intelligence. Inclusive leaders are confident and effective in cross-cultural interactions. Collaboration, we've already touched on. Highly inclusive leaders empower individuals as well as create and leverage the thinking of diverse groups. Then we move to commitment. Highly inclusive leaders are committed to diversity and inclusion because those objectives also align to their own personal values, and they really believe in that power of synergy, that together as a group we can achieve more than each one of us alone. Courage. Highly inclusive leaders speak up and challenge the status quo, and they're humble about their own strengths and weaknesses. and cognizance, the awareness of bias. Highly inclusive leaders are mindful of personal and organisational blind spots and take action to self-regulate themselves, and also organisational practices to help ensure fair play. So thinking about these traits and putting them in context of inclusive leadership, it's about treating people and groups fairly based on their unique characteristics rather than stereotypes. It's around personalizing individuals, understanding and valuing the uniqueness of diverse others, whilst also including them and welcoming them as members of the group. And it's leveraging that difference in thinking, perceptions, experience, and contributions. It helps for smarter ideation, decision-making, and helps us to reduce the risk of bias and create that kind of culture where the best research happens. So let's relate some of that Deloitte research to the work of Professor West and see how they connect. And when we think about curiosity as the first skill, Mark talked about listening in the attending behaviour, listening, that skill to develop curiosity. And Professor Michael West talks about his work about listening with fascination. That's a term that's come from some work by Nancy Klein. And it's really attentive listening, listening with empathy, real active empathetic listening. We're listening to understand what somebody is saying to us, rather than listening to while we're thinking about how we're going to respond to them, which can often happen in busy and frantic environments. Yeah, so really trying to look at not only what we're hearing, what we're seeing in terms of body language, tone, clearly sometimes more difficult in a remote environment, but really trying to understand what really is being said. And by placing our attention to others, we can be that natural, authentic curiosity. We can really take that concept of listening with fascination to a deeper level. So how are you listening to others? We talked about attending being perhaps the area that perhaps we need to focus on a little bit more. How do you listen to others? How do you ensure that you're listening to understand rather than thinking about what you're going to reply? Secondly, we've got cultural intelligence. So we've talked about the awareness of the need to be attentive to other cultures. The leaders who practice that cultural intelligence trait is they're motivated and interested and curious to take time to learn about and understand different cultures, and are able to manage the ambiguity and adapt to those different cultures sensitively. And by developing our empathy, we're naturally going to help others feel that sense of welcome and belonging. Next, we look at collaboration. So working and leading collaboratively is key to embracing inclusivity. We've talked about that before, but that team or group who are cohesive, that are working on the collective goal, they value each other's difference and value each other's different perspectives and lived experience. And so they're interested to collaborate and learn from each other, share ideas, share their thinking. And it naturally feels like a place where people want to belong and want to and feel safe to contribute to. The team will also feel safe to speak up if there are any problems or issues, and they're committed to taking accountability when empowered. And it comes back to the phrase developed by Stephen Covey back in the 80s, if we weigh in, we buy in. So just by having that ability to communicate and collaborate, we're going to buy into what we want to then deliver as a group. Commitment. So inclusive leaders articulate authentic commitment to diversity. They challenge the status quo. They hold themselves and others accountable, and they make diversity and inclusion a personal and team priority. So how do we speak up when problems arise? How do we speak up when problems arise for ourselves or for others? And can we encourage that ability to speak up within our teams? Just take a moment to reflect on about a time when you've challenged the status quo. What was your experience and what did you learn from that? Or maybe there's been a time when you haven't challenged a situation and regretted it and wished you had. What was it that might have stopped you at that point? And how could you then do it in the future should that experience occur again? Could have been courage. So we talked about inclusive leaders wanting and having to be courageous. It's not about hero leadership, swooping in and saving the day. It's the courage where the leaders are highly self-aware, have that deep awareness and attention of the team. They value each member of the team for their difference and unique contribution. And they build a strong foundation of trust, showing their own vulnerability, as well as encouraging others to talk about theirs. They need to be prepared to speak up, to challenge personal and organisational bias can sometimes feel uncomfortable, and it does come with some personal risk. So personal courage is required, and an opportunity to enable others to feel that courage too. And then finally, that aspect of cognizance of bias, the awareness of the personal blind spots and biases that we all hold. And as well, the flaws in the system. So the leader, the inclusive leader here, works hard to ensure meritocracy. And we know about inequalities in society, in health and social care, and we know that they are a major challenge. And there's a piece that Ben Fouche of the King's Fund wrote about that advantage blindness in healthcare, the blind spots that pertain to social and economic advantage. And we also know through the work of the EDI Programme Board that Mark mentioned previously, the need to be aware of bias within our own research, and some of the activities and actions and initiatives that they are pioneering as a board is helping researchers to ensure their research is based from a position of inclusivity. So by being aware of it, by challenging it, and by working hard to address it, to address the bias and potential advantage and blindness of advantage, is really key to the inclusive leadership style. So let's have a think about yourselves and think about your own inclusive leadership behaviours. And we've got a poll now. So first of all, out of our 6 signature traits, which trait would you say you feel most confident with at this stage? And Mark, if you can see, you've opened the poll there, so thank you for that.
Poll is open. Need some background music.
Yeah. So Mark, where do you think you feel most confident here?
On reflection, I think the curiosity. I'm naturally a very nosy person, so I ask lots of. I'm more asking questions than answering questions. I feel most confident with being curious.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I think, again, curiosity, maybe it's something to do with the field of work that we're in. And as an executive coach, I'm kind of trained to be asking lots of questions, but I know that teamwork and collaboration is one of my strengths. I love working in a group. So, you know, again, I think really welcoming in that difference and diversity and encouraging that is important for me.
Definitely. We've got 87% in, so I think
Fantastic.
we will close that and share the results.
Yes,
so we've got neck and neck between collaborating and curiosity. So people after my own heart.
Yeah.
And then commitment third, intelligence, courage, cognizance, biases. Yeah, so yes, most confidence around collaboration and curiosity.
Yes, and I can see that the you know, the lower scores certainly around that courage and cognizance. Often it's that we feel that we need to really build that courage to be able to have some of those conversations, and so there's something around being able to understand how that looks. And I think when certainly when I've experienced situations in the past that are uncomfortable, it's often about asking the question, what is the right thing for us to do here? What feels right? And being confident to ask those questions, to check in.
Great.
So just thinking again from the other perspective, and it'll be, I guess we'll see a mirror image of what we've seen, but what are we least confident with? What do we find most difficult? And again, Mark, I'll ask you, what do you find difficult in terms of the inclusive leadership traits?
The cognizance. I think I'm getting better at spotting my biases. But it's making sure they don't get in the way of making good decisions.
Yeah, and I think by being aware that we have them and hold them and recognize, you know, partly the awareness is the fact that then we can recognize them can help so much, but then having the courage to do something about that as well. Definitely important. And I guess commitment as well. Are we vocal about these things? Because sometimes we know it could lead to a challenging conversation, or a conversation that might feel uncomfortable. How committed are we to having those conversations? So yes, we're seeing more of a mirror image of the first poll here, with courage actually looking much more challenging from 41%, cognizance 32%. And then, of course, that cultural intelligence at 15%. So quite a marked difference there as well.
Definitely.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I guess understanding where we need to place our attention in terms of inclusive behaviours is really key. And we'll share the reference to the Deloitte article, which gives you much more information about each of those behaviours and what you might be able to do to develop them further. And of course, again, just a reminder that the NIHR EDI Programme Board provides support and guidance on how to practice inclusivity and involvement, both in research, but also aims to embed equality, diversity and inclusion into culture and ways of working. So that will be an excellent source of information and learning for people too. So let's bring that compassion and inclusivity together. And, you know, as we've said, Professor Michael West believes that inclusive leadership is subsumed by compassionate leadership. If we act with compassion, we are automatically inclusive. And we can see with this next slide how the behaviours of inclusive leadership link with those 4 practices of compassionate leadership. So we can see here, while the shift in leadership does require courage and long-term commitment, we can see how some of these behaviours can support both compassion and inclusivity together. So by attending that level of curiosity, by understanding the cultural intelligence, by helping and by empathizing, really, you know, being aware of our biases, being feeling courageous to help and support, and then of course with that collaboration and commitment, really helping others from a leadership perspective. So it does require courage, it does require long-term commitment, but we've got some quick win development actions to help you improve your compassionate, inclusive leadership almost immediately. So the first thing we can do is we can deepen our self-awareness. We can really think about some of those biases that we hold and notice them when they arise and when they show up, and seek feedback on whether we're perceived as inclusive, especially from people who are different to us. They will help us see those blind spots if we're not seeing them ourselves. They'll help us see our strengths and our development areas. And it will be a signal, because we're asking about the feedback, that it's an aspect of leadership and behaviour that's really important to you, that diversity and inclusion are important to you. We can be visible and vocal. We can talk about why being inclusive is important to us personally in the work that we do. We can deliberately seek out difference. We can give people the chance to speak up. We can ask for alternative views and ideas in meetings. We can invite different people to the table that are going to bring that different perspective, different style of thinking, different lived experience to contribute. And we can practice and develop a broader network. And the fourth one we can do is check our impact, look and see where we might be having a positive impact. Is it that we are having a more diverse group of people sharing ideas with us? Are people working more collaboratively? Are they feeling safer to speak up and challenge? Are people seeing what you're doing maybe and copying that and that role modeling of your approach? So there's 4 activities that we can do almost immediately. But as I say, we've got so much more detail to share with you in an online module that's coming up soon. And also we'll share some additional resources to help you look into some of these practices and activities even more. So just interested to hear now, Mark, if you can run the next poll. Where might people want to focus on? What of those quick wins might you be interested in exploring further?
Poll is running.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you might want to do to improve your inclusivity more, Mark?
I think for me, check the impact.
Yeah.
Quite often you do something and you assume it's kind of landed as you expected it to. It hasn't always landed as it expects to. So yeah, checking impacts are really important for me.
So yeah,
29%. So that's 80% and share results. There we go. Oh, as if by magic.
Fantastic. There you go then.
So yeah,
there we go. So we can see that checking our impact, is it working? Is what we're doing having the right impact? Being visible and vocal, being much more vocal about our beliefs and our values and our intentions. Seeking out difference and then deepening self-awareness. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So yes, compassionate and inclusive leadership, of course, starts with you. It does require courage. It does require resilience. It does require strong belief and strong commitment. And it also begins with some self-compassion too. If we can attend to ourselves, understand the challenges that we face in our work, if we can empathize and care for ourselves, then take wise action to help ourselves, we're going to be much more enabled to be able to do that for others. We can have deeper, more effective, more authentic interactions with all of those that work for you and with you. So we've looked at the key principles of compassionate and inclusive leadership. We've looked at why it's important. We've given you some ideas of how to further develop your compassionate and inclusive leadership. And thank you for participating in all our polls. Here are some references, some additional resources that you might be interested in accessing. And so, as I also mentioned, we've got our suite of online resources soon to be coming on NIHR Learn. So this will include a module on compassionate and inclusive leadership. So thank you for your time and attention, and we'd really love to hear from you now and address any questions that you might have. So I'm going to hand over to Craig to facilitate our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Jo, and thank you, Mark, as well, for that really interesting presentation. We have had quite a lot of chat and questions coming through. And I do know that we're kind of time sensitive at the moment. So what I'll do is I'll go through the questions from those that have been voted the most. And the first one is, I find it really hard to be compassionate when I'm tired and my workload is overwhelming. What can I do to be more compassionate at those times?
I think for, do you want me to go, Jo?
Yeah, go for it.
Go for it. I think with this one, it's take a breath and take a pause. And just before you react, because we're all tired and someone's nagging at you and you think, oh, just go away. But actually just consider your impact. So that whole thing of considering your impact, just take a breath, and you are at their service of being curious to why they are. It's difficult when you're in kind of the heat of the moment, but I think it's important to take a pause and a breath, and then you can engage really well with that person then.
Yeah. And I think, again, thinking about being kind to yourself, sometimes we often talk about fitting our own oxygen mask before helping others on the aircraft, and that analogy is so important, and so important in the healthcare setting as well, of course.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, any suggestions about what to do when you empathise and want to help, but someone above you is blocking that?
So I think it's difficult if you haven't got that kind of line manager relationship, if it's a colleague. But I guess being there for your colleague and showing empathy to your colleague is going to help rather than hinder, and perhaps having that conversation with the line manager to explain what you're trying to do within boundaries of confidence, and making sure that that's okay, but explaining the benefit of what being empathetic will bring. It's not just about helping, I guess, the individual, although that is the key priority. It's about helping the organisation and helping that individual be the best they can be within that organisation. So trying to maybe think of the wider benefit as well as the personal benefit for that employee.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, how do you act compassionately when you're attempting to sorry, I'll start again with that one. How do you act compassionately when attempts to support someone to be able to perform an appropriate level have failed?
Did you want that one, Joe? Because this feels to me more, it's a performance conversation. The compassionate part of it is to understand why the other person is not performing. It doesn't mean it's going to be an easy conversation. It's having a difficult conversation, but you can do it from a compassionate place.
Yeah, and something that resonates with me, for anyone that's ever come across the work of Brené Brown, she does a lot of work on compassion and courage, and she's written a book on daring to lead, and she talks about clarity is kindness. Yeah, so when there is a performance issue or challenge, the actual kind thing to do is to be clear about that, to not worry about hurting people's feelings, but actually explain, this is the situation, this is the impact it's having, I want to help you improve. So that taking that kind of mantra, clarity is kindness, is a really helpful way to feel more comfortable about giving feedback with a positive intent.
Okay, thank you for that, Jo. So the next question is, I find it difficult to empathise when you have an individual who is constantly seeking attention. When I do the best that I can and sign, post or refer to supporting departments, example, counselling, well-being, etc., but the same issues keep cropping up every single month, how can I maintain an empathy and enable this individual to progress?
Yeah, I think, again, it's probably coming back to having some of those positive, intentional conversations. So I want to help you. This is happening. I'm seeing a pattern. How can we move this forward? And taking that kind of practice of clarity is kindness, really trying to get to the root cause of the issue, trying to help that individual to progress forward. Anything to add there, Mark?
Yeah, kind of for fear of wandering into a kind of medical context, it's like the person, the smoker who has cancer, convincing them to stop smoking, and there can be a blocker within their heads of actually there's something else as a root cause as what's going on. So it's kind of logic says that I should do this, but I'm just not doing it. Something's getting in the way of that. So Joe said there's some kind of habit there to be able to get to the root of.
Thank you. So another question. I do feel that a compassionate leadership style is often perceived by other senior team members in my area as weakness or indecision. So how can I best influence and challenge this perception in those who I work alongside with in a matrix management structure? Good question.
Really good. I think it comes back to the myths that Mark kind of demithed and myth busted previously, you know, highlighting the benefits of inclusive leadership, of compassionate leadership, really helping to get the best out of our people, our teams, helping them perform in the best way that they can, feeling safe to perform in that way. And kind of really anchoring on those organizational benefits. It's not just soft, fluffy stuff. There's some evidence here that things are better when we work with compassion and inclusivity. We've got evidence.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Joe. Is results speak louder than it's actually the results speaking for it, rather than convincing somebody that compassion is actually a strength, not a weakness.
Brilliant. Thank you both. I like this next question actually. How do you balance collaboration with assertiveness?
So this is it's that careful balance of challenge and support.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong about being assertive. There's something wrong with being coercive but not assertive, and it's understanding where the barriers with that are. I think we've talked about understanding the other person's position, being able to share your own, so you've got that vulnerability of understanding of being able to share where you are.
Yeah, I think, sorry Mark, I've just spoke over you, but I think there's something about over consensus and over collaboration as well, and it's understanding where do I really need to collaborate, what is going to give me the best value, or where do I actually need to be assertive here and show some direction and show the fact that I need to make a decision. And I think, again, it's coming back to communication and clarity. If we're clear, we're being assertive because of the need to achieve, and it's not assertive from a self perception. It's assertive to achieve whatever the objective is we're looking to achieve.
Okay.
So there's definitely something around that. Where do we collaborate, and where do we need to make decisions quickly, or where do we have to make a call?
Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious of the time now.
Yeah.
Joe, Mark, so that's good. We'll continue as much as we can. So the next question was, I find that working virtually is having a big impact on my ability to pick up signs that my team are struggling. What can I do to pick up on the signals that they might indeed be struggling?
Do you want to take this one, Joe? With this one is if you're all in the same office, you kind of pick up the signals, and that definitely resonates. Is that if you're working virtually, then how are you picking up the signals? A few things that have worked for other colleagues and worked for me is more regular check-in. So more frequent check-ins, shorter, more frequent, asking those questions, being curious about how the other person's doing, and the body language which you may miss through virtual working, you can pick up through the language. And if you get into that groove, I know I've got friends, and they have their team has a half-hour check-in at 9 o'clock every morning. And they just have a cup of coffee. It's not about work. It's a non-work half hour. And that just helps tease out anyone who's kind of struggling within that. So I think it is the more use video. We're kind of all zoomed out over the past year, but actually it's important to keep up the video call. Maybe balance it with telephone, because telephone is a different kind of dynamic, but regular check-ins I think really help.
Yeah, and I think as well, having conversations as a team, but also one-to-one time, because not everybody's happy to really vocalize with a full group, and using different channels. So a group I work with, we've got a WhatsApp, and you can tell when people perhaps aren't feeling great. They kind of come out they come out of the conversation in the WhatsApp, they go quiet. So it's a signal, actually, I might need to check in with that person because they're not posting funny memes anymore or replying to the jokes or the conversation in the WhatsApp. So trying to use different channels to pick those signals up in is useful.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got a couple more questions yet. I hope everybody's all right for time, but I understand that people have this diarised until 2 o'clock. So please, feel free to dial out if you would like to. So the next question is, I think I'm a compassionate inclusive in general, but I'm not always good at performing active listening or expressing empathy to the extent what sometimes is expected. Also, I joined during lockdown, so I haven't actually met most of my colleagues. Does this mean I'm not actually as aware as I think, or do I need acting classes, which is quite good, or both, or would that not be authentic?
For me, the key thing with active listening is to be reflecting back. So the way you prove your active listening is somebody says something and you ask them to explain a bit more, or you reflect back, from what you said, this is kind of what I'm getting from you. That is the best way of demonstrating you're actively listening. And just by using reflective language, paraphrasing, all those tips and techniques you can have around active listening, dead easy to do. So basically just practice those, and you will come across as genuine. It won't come across as false. You're just asking questions of clarification. That could really help.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is not to be too worried about leaving gaps of silence. So again, sometimes we are very quick to jump in when somebody's telling us a problem because we want to help. We're very quick to jump in, and we might not say the right thing. So by giving a little gap of silence, you're waiting and you're giving that opportunity for the person to continue talking rather than jumping in with a solution or an idea or how they can make it better. So definitely checking back in and paraphrasing, also leaving a bit of silence, giving them a bit of time.
Okay, thank you for that. So the next question is, we've gone through a large leadership restructure due to previously the team not working well and leading to poor relations and demotivated staff. Over the last couple of years, the majority of staff have embraced this, but we still have a small number who don't seem to change, and this is now demotivating the staff who have embraced new ways of working and supporting each other. So the question is, how do we compassionately lead the individuals who don't want to work to improve teamwork when we can't seem to break through to motivate them?
Yeah, so again, quite a difficult scenario where people have gone through a lot of change, and some of that challenge might be quite deep rooted. So it's about really honest, open conversations with those individuals. What is it? What can we do to help? What is at the root of the problem? And again, it comes back to those principles of clarity is kindness. This is what we're observing. This is what we're seeing. I might assume this, but I really want to understand from you what's your perspective here? What can we do to help and move this on?
Okay, so that actually brings us to the end of our Q&A. So thanks again to Mark and Joe for a really interesting presentation, and I hope that everybody feels that they've benefited from attending, and I can certainly see from some of the comments that we're receiving in the chat and the questions that people do feel that way. I also hope that you're able to use some of these learnings going forward. If you've enjoyed the webinar, you can watch it back again on the NIHR TV YouTube channel under the Development and Support Series playlist, where you can also find all of our previous webinars from the series. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.